welcome. This is our annual show that so many of our listeners out there just adore. We've gotten email after email asking, where is your Summer of 1988 show? Well, guys, here it is. We're doing it tonight. A special roundtable between myself, I'm Jamie, and Jerry, and Aaron. The gang's all here, and we're going to talk about all the movie releases from the summer of 1988, from May to August. So it tends to be a long show, so let's get it started. The first film released on May 1st, actually, I believe, is a Mike Figgis film called Stormy Monday. Sting, Melanie Griffith, Tommy Lee Jones. But was this Mike Figgis' first movie? It was, wasn't it?
I think
it was his debut film. He did an interview in a book called My First Film.
Yeah, that's
where
the one.
directors talked about their first film, and he was talking about Stormy Monday. And so when I think about Stormy Monday, I think about what a jerk Tommy Lee Jones is, because in that interview, he was talking about the complete horror of working with Tommy Lee Jones, where Tommy Lee Jones constantly tested him to the point where during one scene, he wanted Tommy Lee Jones to give a certain reaction, and Tommy Lee Jones just wasn't doing it. He kept saying, no, I want you to say the line this way with a smile, and he refused to do it time after time after time, until finally Mike Figgis ended up screaming at Tommy Lee Jones, and then Tommy Lee Jones gave him the look he wanted. I mean, it was just a nonstop test and a battle, which isn't very... I mean, why did you agree to do the movie if you're going to be a douchebag?
Just ask Paul Schrader about George C. Scott.
Yeah, so that when I think of Stormy Monday, I think Tommy Lee Jones is a douchebag.
Well, he's actually very good in it, and the thing that I remember the thing about Tommy Lee Jones, he's one of those actors who, there are these alpha actors who, they like to see how much they can get away with until the director pushes back, and they're like, oh, okay, so he will stand up. There are actors who, if a director doesn't, stand up or push back, then why would I respect them or do whatever they want me to do? They want to be controlled. And Tommy Lee Jones is like that. And the thing about Stormy Monday, it's a mood piece, and a lot of these, well, I guess all of Figgis' movies are kind of mood pieces. I mean, I think the following film was Liebestrom from '91. It was also kind of moody, and and there's then of course we all know Leaving Las Vegas and so forth. But this was one of those neo-noirs, as they like to call it. But instead of it being kind of like a body heat, this was more about the kind of rain and kind of iconography. Melanie Griffith, Sting, always one of those guys who he's always been capable of being an actor. He's always chosen kind of the role that I guess kind of interest him, or the experiences that interest him, as opposed to getting the juicy roles.
What is Dead Heat? That came out in May 6th.
That's with if I'm not mistaken. I'm not going to cheat here. I'm not even going to look on IMDb. That's with Joe Piscopo and Treat Williams, isn't it?
Oh, good lord.
Yes,
yeah,
the
Joe
zombie
Piscopo.
film.
There's a name for you.
That sounds promising.
I believe it's a buddy zombie film.
I think it's a buddy zombie film. It was the R.I.P.D. of its day. It suffered the same, but not nearly as much money. Let me. All right, I'm going to look it up now. Let's see. Let me see.
No, actually, Joe Piscopo zombie film is enough. I mean, you don't have to look it up beyond that.
Two cops. Listen to this. Two cops are brought back to life to chase down supernatural criminals. Doesn't that really just sound exactly like R.I.P.D.?
Wow.
Or Men in Black, or...
Darren McGavin and Vincent Price were in it.
There's obviously a film that was kind of greenlit. Once again, everyone was trying to chase the kind of the specter of Ghostbusters.
Right, absolutely.
And this was, I'm sure they probably thought, it was only a month earlier. I'm sure they thought, we'll ride the Beetlejuice coattails, but that didn't happen.
No, that did not.
And of course, on that same day, we had Shakedown with Peter Weller and Sam Elliott. Shakedown is the one, I mean, this is my most vivid recollection of that movie. Maybe it's a different one that I'm thinking of, but isn't there a roller coaster that becomes derailed?
Yes.
Yes.
Shakedown is a very good action film. It's one of those, obviously it's a buddy film. It's not cop buddy per se, but the buddy, the mismatched partners, and once again, casting is everything. So Sam Elliott and Peter Weller, they're not your first picks for mismatched buddies, and that's what kind of gave it a little bit of a spin. And it's just the action scenes are pretty spectacular on a film that was obviously made on a budget.
Well, the following week was a Friday the 13th. This was part 7, The New Blood. Which one was this? This was the one right before the Jason Takes Manhattan, but what happened
the psychic
in
one.
The New Blood? Oh,
the
yeah,
psychic,
okay.
The psychic one with the sleeping bag kill that everyone talks about.
That was a good kill. Yeah.
And was cut down for rating purposes. Wasn't as graphic. From what I've read, the little I've read on here and there, that supposedly Jason just started with really banging the sleeping bag against the tree, and just constantly until it was just kind of, you could tell it was all, almost like liquid or something. But I think in the final cut, I think he only hits the tree once with the bag. So wasn't as, it's a good kill, it's a fun kill. Anyway, so yeah, New Blood. And I remember that one was actually, once again, was number 1. And they had taken a year off. There was no Friday the 13th in '87. So they took a year off. So it'd been almost 2 years since part 6.
That's right.
Well, I'm sure we'll learn a lot more about Friday the 13th part 7 when that 7-hour documentary comes out in the next month or so.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I cannot wait for 7 hours of Friday the 13th.
I actually can't. I don't know why. I'm just really excited about that documentary.
I admire the dedication, the fact that they we're going to make the epic documentary on Friday the 13th. I do admire the dedication of doing it. It's like I want to see the 4-hour documentary on the Problem Child series.
May 20th.
I want to see that. Wait, I want to see that. That sounds pretty good.
May 20th, Ron Howard and George Lucas joined forces to bring us Willow, which I think in retrospect is kind of beloved a lot more than it was when it first came out. It performed disappointingly when it first opened.
Its numbers were, I'm sure if we look at its numbers are like, oh, that's fairly decent, but it was, one of those things of expectations. And then it's also one of these things, the kids, us, we were 10 years old, supposedly, or Jamie, you're a little older, when Willow came out. So
I'm a senior citizen, so,
Yeah. So, but I was like 9 going on 10 in Willow, so I was like right in the sweet spot for Willow. So there is that group who, hadn't really fully developed discernible taste yet. So, and the thing is, 25 years later, there's a lot of nostalgia. It's like, oh, I love Willow. When, honestly, Willow, if you really look at it, it's interesting, but it doesn't stay with you. You can tell it's Lucas kind of wanting to start up his own franchise. There are some good things in it. Val Kilmer's fun, but you can kind of see all that it's made from spare parts. The fun stuff, for if you're like a more, evolved movie watcher, the fun stuff is, I guess, kind of the dig at criticism. I think isn't the evil queen is Queen Kale, I believe. That was that's always a good gag.
You bring up a great point, Aaron, about there is nostalgia for, at least in the mid '90s. I worked at a bookstore when there were Chris Claremont, who wrote a lot. I think it was Chris Claremont who wrote a lot of the X-Men stories and everything. He wrote they wrote a trilogy of new books based on Willow, and the younger kids there thought Willow was that's the coolest movie.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. And this was before, just like a year or two really before the internet happened. But they swore by it. They ate this stuff up. They loved Willow. They could quote from it. I was just really flabbergasted.
It was one of those things. It was, it was Ron Howard. It was George Lucas. It was kind of a swashbuckling adventure. So
right,
we did go, and it's not incompetently made, but it doesn't have that personal touch that the first Star Wars trilogy has, that Lucas brought to it. And frankly, Ron Howard's strength is ensemble cast, not fantasy. Fantasy's not his strength. its ensemble act. That's why if you look at Cocoon, the fantasy, the sci-fi is in the background. It's very very light. It's the ensemble acting that makes Cocoon. It's not the sci-fi.
You're absolutely right.
The next week, May 25th.
A good movie did come out that day. Jack's Back with James Spader. That was like I didn't see it in theaters, but it came when it was on cable. That was a pretty good movie. That's by Rowdy Harrington did that.
Like Shakedown, it was a good, promising effort from someone who showed a lot of talent. You really were hoping, and unfortunately, I think Rowdy Harrington went on to do, Striking Distance. Sadly,
I think that might have been the last thing he did. Now that's the movie I want to see remade. No, I'm joking. Jack's Back, and that was a great. That was the first starring role for James Spader. It was a good kind of a dual role, and it's a good little thriller. So
James Spader's Blue City.
It's better than Blue City.
May 20. I actually just spoke to the cinematographer of Blue City.
Oh, really?
And strangely enough, I didn't even mention it.
The little I know of Blue City, I know that film was because just go on a quick tangent. I do know that film was just mired in trouble, and there was a lot of fighting, and that the director was a backstabber and so forth. So there's a lot of drama on that film.
Was Tommy Lee Jones the director? Okay. Hang on.
But so then May 25th, and so I guess this is Memorial Day weekend. So here, Jerry, is where quote unquote the summer begins.
Yeah, and this is you have two big sequels that day.
And what were they?
Crocodile Dundee 2 and Rambo 3.
And then can't you just see what memories you have? You're like, oh yeah, school was letting out, and that weekend were Rambo 3 and Crocodile Dundee 2. Like, yeah, that's summer. Like, you knew that was
Yeah, you did. You're absolutely right. And they were both letdowns, from what I remember.
Yeah. Well, one was a sequel that really didn't need to be made. That was Dundee 2. And the other one was like, well, the second one was surprisingly a good sequel, so maybe they'll do it again. And it was also kind of a letdown. And I guess if I'm not mistaken, Rambo 3 was, at the time, the most expensive movie made. I think it was in the...
And the timing was because it was dated by the time it came out, because the Soviets had pulled out of Afghanistan, I think earlier that year, if I'm not mistaken. So they were like, there was all this thing. Oh my God, the timing's off. That was a big deal. I remember I watched it on VHS. I was like, it's okay. It's not. Crocodile Dundee, I think, put me to sleep, the second one. I liked the first one. I thought that was very funny in high school, but the second one I just could care less about.
Well, the first one was such a sleeper hit.
Yeah.
The second one was inevitable. I remember kind of liking the second one, and I remember seeing it that opening Saturday. And as for Rambo 3, I think the only memorable part of that movie, and it's the part that a lot of people remember, is when he cauterizes the wound and the flame goes all the way through his belly to the other side.
And so, the thing about Dundee 2 is that it kind of reversed. It was smart in that it reversed the pattern of the first one. That first half was in the city, then the second half was in the jungle. But you realize that you didn't want to see him. You want the contrast was him in the city. Like, that's the fun, the fish out of the water. When him going back to where his comfort zone is, there's not much fun in there. And then of course it's a drug. It's a drug lord, and so. I think as we'll go later on, as we'll see later on if we go down this list, Rambo 3 just feels kind of, you can feel kind of the datedness of that kind of over steroid action film, as we'll see in some of the later action films of the summer.
Right. You got it. That's an interesting point.
June 3rd was a big movie. And it was big. Originally supposed to star Robert De Niro, and that didn't work out. So when De Niro doesn't work out, you go to a young Tom Hanks.
It was a magical movie. I loved that. I was blown away by Big. I hadn't been blown away by a movie in a long time in the theater, for a while, and it just really took my breath away. I was really surprised by that.
The thing about Big, it's interesting is that, well, one, it's a Penny Marshall's follow-up to Jumping Jack Flash, which, critics didn't really pay much attention to and didn't do that well like a year and a half earlier, Christmas '86. So what is she going to do next? And then you got to remember, it was coming on the heels of, I think, the fourth Body Switch movie.
Right.
Kind of, I think, like Father Like Son, Vice Versa, 18 Again had all come out. And so this was the fourth one. And I do remember, like, on E.T. or something, they were like, is the public ready for another Body Switch movie? But, of course, the thing is that it's not a Body Switch movie. It sort of is, but it's, like, different. It's kind of like Peggy Sue Got Married is not like Back to the Future, even though it kind of, has an outline of Back to the Future. So Big is kind of a similar thing, and it was like the sharpest written of all those Body Switch movies. And it was one of those surprise hits. I don't think it ever went to number one. If I remember, I used to like follow the top 10. That's when I started that summer, and I think it stayed at like number 2 for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks. It just stayed there, and it just consistent numbers all through the summer, and it just played throughout the summer. And and of course Tom Hanks goes and gets his nomination. Basically, that's the film that makes Tom Hanks. He hadn't had.
It really does, because prior to that, he was doing Bachelor Party and The Man with One Red Shoe and that kind of stuff.
But he
Splash, though.
Splash and Nothing in Common, though.
Yeah. And the thing, and he was. They were trying to give him some leads, and Splash clicked, but all the other leads didn't click. Man with One Red Shoe and Volunteers didn't click. Dragnet, he was the second lead, Nothing in Common. He was also a co-lead, if you will. He still hadn't had that one film that crystallized everything, and Big was that film. And then, of course, that fall was Punchline.
Right.
So we really got to see his range.
Well, that same day, a good Chevy Chase film came out, which I thought was a sign of the apocalypse, because the good Chevy Chase films are few and far between. But I remember critics actually being really taken aback that it was so good with Funny Farm, which is George Roy Hill. Was that George Roy Hill's last movie?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
George Roy Hill's last movie. Had top flight production of Alan Heim was the editor on that. Jeffrey Boehm, screenwriter, who did Straight Time and Lethal Weapon 2. He was a great screenwriter, and there were some other big guys like the cinematographer. I forget his name escapes me right now. But yeah, no, that's easily my favorite Chevy Chase performance, because it is a performance, and that's probably the best director Chevy Chase worked with is George Roy Hill off the top of my head. And yeah, and of course here, I guess, even, and it's kind of a little maybe ironic or just maybe a little something to lament, is that Chevy Chase's best film, surprisingly best film, and I'm sure that's the one people had their money on. They're like, this, because Chevy Chase was the biggest star, and Big is the one that kind of blows it out of the water that weekend. Once again, kind of an old guard giving way to a new guard. Well, I'll ask you this, Jamie. Did you see both of those, or only one of those in theaters? Which ones did you see in theater?
I saw them both in the theater.
All right.
I saw Funny Farm. I saw Funny Farm opening night, and then I saw Big that weekend.
And I saw Big in theater. I didn't see Funny Farm because I wasn't that big of a Chevy Chase fan at the time. I didn't see Funny Farm until cassette, and I was like surprised on how.
Yeah, I saw that on cassette, and that
how good it was. And do you remember, you guys? Do you remember which one you were more excited for?
Excited for?
I used to have to say Funny Farm and all, just because it was Chevy Chase, but I like Tom Hanks a lot too. Because I always liked Tom Hanks from Bosom Buddies. So I mean, I went to go see every Tom Hanks film in a theater.
So you're the one who saw Volunteers.
Oh, I saw it. You damn right. I thought that was, at the time, it was like 10th grade. I thought it was 9th grade. That was
what was the romance that Tom Hanks did around that time, where he was a soldier and he fell in love with...
Yeah, that was Volunteers.
No. It was it had a longer title. It was his first like strictly dramatic role, and it was a romance.
Right. Oh God,
a foreign woman that he fell in love with, and God, what's the name of that movie?
Oh God, all right, now you're killing me here. All right,
I'll look it up. Every time
I'm looking it up right now.
It's like every time I say goodbye or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exactly what it is. That's actually what it is. Every time we say goodbye.
I know the title.
Money Pit. I like the Money Pit a lot too. I like Dragnet. I liked all those movies. They were fun, you know.
Every time we say goodbye, I don't think I've ever seen that film.
Yeah, it's probably impossible to get now, but
he probably has it, like all the copies of it, like, and he's burned them.
Yeah, it's along the lines of a Captain Corelli's Mandolin. June 10th, we had Big on June 3rd. On June 10th, we had Big Business, one of several releases that day. Big Business
that was
being
a big
the
day.
Lily Tomlin, Bette Midler movie, and Bette Midler was on fire at this time.
That's right.
Of Ruthless People, and that's in Disney. She had a contract with Disney.
Yeah, Outrageous Fortune, and now this.
Bette Midler working for Disney. That's just, but Ruthless People was obviously an R-rated comedy under Touchstone.
And Down in Beverly Hills.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are really both of those movies. I mean, it's really funny. She was at at that time like a huge star. And then and Beaches has like there's like this like I don't know. Is Beaches just one of these immortal movies that just guys don't get? I mean,
I like Beaches. I mean, it's
a good movie. Don't get me wrong. It's a good movie. I mean, my mom likes it, and she's not crazy about those kind of movies, but she even likes that movie. But
I think in general, guys don't take it to heart as much as female audiences.
Yeah, because I was watching the to-do list. I think it's the one with in the to-do list, and there's a whole thing about beaches, sub-story about beaches in that. So,
I like Beaches, and I even like Stella. I think her Stella's perfect movie. But I mean, Big Business. That was going to be a big thing because Lily Tomlin and the whole thing with these twins and. It didn't really, like Funny Farm, it kind of didn't take off. And
then on that same day you had the third Poltergeist film, and this was the film where Heather O'Rourke died in the midst of shooting.
Right.
And it just wasn't. I mean, the second one wasn't good. This one's even worse, and. It just wasn't.
How could you top the first one?
So
there's no way to.
The first one is just scary. I mean, I still think it's one of the scariest movies.
I saw the first one on HBO, but I did see the second one opening weekend, but I didn't go to see the third one because I knew that I could smell that it was bad. Like I was 14 years old, and it looked obvious that it was bad. But I did see the Presidio, which opened on that same day, June 10th, which is the Peter Hyams movie with Mark Harmon and Sean Connery and Meg Ryan. And this was the time when they were really pushing Mark Harmon to be a movie star. Actually, this summer he had 2 movies out, and this was the first one.
Yeah, 2 movies out, and if I'm not mistaken, Jamie, I think the Ted Bundy movie was that May. That May had just been the Ted Bundy movie miniseries.
It could have been.
Yeah, I remember it was sweeps, and it was a 2-nighter, Sunday, Monday. So Mark Harmon, they're really hyping him. And the thing is, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with hyping him. The thing is, Presidio, it's just, I remember, I think, basically to paraphrase Siskel and Ebert's review, it's kind of like a cop thriller, military thriller for dummies. There's not one surprise. There's not even some of the lines of dialogue you could probably predict. It's just so by numbers. It's kind of it's just boilerplate. It's just boilerplate military cop thriller stuff, espionage, intrigue.
I mean, it was just the fact that he just chose the wrong movies because I think he could have easily been a movie star if he had the right vehicle.
Well, I think the problem with some actors, they're never. I don't know if it's their handlers or maybe them themselves. they're never honest with themselves on what their strengths are. And I think Mark Harmon's real strength, at least theatrically in the big movies, in big screen, I think his strength was light comedy or light romance, where on TV, obviously on something like the Deliberate Stranger on just a small screen, he could be a little more brooding or sinister, but he doesn't have gravitas on the big screen. So that's why.
See, I thought he was fine in the Presidio, and I think if all he needed was to do romantic comedies, then he would have been a movie star after Worth Winning. I think he just needed the right movie.
Right.
But by the time Worth Winning came out, I mean, he'd already, if he would have already tried it, he'd already had like 4 movies in theaters, and they'd all failed. If he had tried another more ensemble comedy like Summer School, which I think that shows his strength theatrically.
That's big time.
That shows his strength theatrically. But when he does seriousness on the big screen, he's just not good. It's like Scott Bakula. Scott Bakula has finally found his niche on the big screen, being in the ensembles, like in the Soderbergh movies. That's
right.
As opposed to trying to be like the lead.
See, I like Mark Harmon as a dramatic actor. I liked him fine in The Presidio, and I really like him in Stealing Home, which came out in August.
Did you think like he's like David Caruso? He's better on TV, you think? Or?
Yeah, some actors are. Yeah.
Some actors are. In Caruso's, I'll just make one point of thinking Caruso, because I have thought about this, is that I do think Caruso was born too late. I think if Caruso had been around in the 40s and 50s, when they were making kind of hard-boiled, the Warner's films or the film.
I agree 100% with that.
He could have been the Richard Widmark of his time.
No, Richard Widmark or Dan Duryea, I was thinking more. I always thought of Dan Duryea.
Alan Ladd. Yeah. That's what he could have been.
You're absolutely right, Aaron. I've always thought that about him, too. I mean, he was born too late.
June 15th was a big movie. Bull Durham, Ron Shelton, often quoted, one of the great baseball movies, and a string of baseball movies from Kevin Costner. But this one was particularly relevant because of not because of the men, but because of Susan Sarandon's character and her performance in it. Just a vividly written female character. And
amazingly, once again, I do think of this film was kind of, obviously made today. I do think she would have had definitely a lock on a nomination. Back then, they thought she was going to get nominated, but she didn't. I think she would have had a lock now. I think they're a little more receptive to those types of, kind of full-range comic female performances. It was Costner's that's really his star-making performance. He'd gotten heat from Untouchables and No Way Out, but this was and of course Silverado, but this was really his star-making performance. And of course Tim Robbins, someone we had seen in Top Gun and Howard the Duck, and
right.
But, this came as a surprise, and it is one of the great baseball movies, one of the great romances, and it was the sleeper hit of that summer.
Right.
I think it stayed around, I think it stayed around the 3, 4, and 5 for a few weeks, and it just kept staying, and it was it's just terrific romance, and it is one of those perennials. When it goes to the phase on Showtime on HBO or Cinemax, I come across it, I will stop and watch 15, 20 minutes of it, and it's always good.
Well, it's also, just to go back to Sarandon, it's an amazing accomplishment for Ron Shelton too, because great female roles and romantic comedies was basically unheard of, but you combine that with a great female role in a sports movie as well, and that's doubly unheard of. So I think that's really what made that movie pop and made it so unique, and the fact that it was written by someone that you had a sense really knew that world. Bull Durham must have come out on a Wednesday, because 2 days later on Friday we had The Great Outdoors and Red Heat.
Now here's the thing. I actually do like some of Red Heat. I think.
Yeah.
I do like some of it, but you look at something like Red Heat into a lesser, into a more extent Presidio. You kind of just feel the formula. Where if you look at something, if you go back and look at something like Shakedown, which is just 3 weeks earlier, Shakedown just has a high energy volume. High energy level that you can feel these other two. I mean, Shakedown is the kind of film Walter Hill would have made, a few years before Red Heat. But Red Heat is just kind of, it gets more of its mileage out of the comedy than it does the action. But I mean, so it's just one of those. Once again, it's funny, Schwarzenegger and Stallone have these movies out, and we're in this summer, in this action summer, and they're kind of routine at that point.
And they're very routine.
They're beaten out big time by a movie that comes out the following month that we'll discuss.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a great. It's really interesting what happened to action movies, and you could probably trace it back to this summer in some of these titles that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen Red Heat in forever. I remember that it was a limp movie.
It shows Walter Hill also sort of his style is also feels stale. Or his beginning.
He does a proficient job like Walter Hill, so it is crisp. It does move, but it doesn't have the excitement that the previous year was Extreme Prejudice with Nolte and Powers Booth, and that's a terrific, tight little modern western. Mm-hmm. And then the following year in '89, Jamie, this film, Johnny Handsome. So you look at the films that come on either side of Red Heat, and you look at Red Heat, and while it's not lazily made, it just feels, it just doesn't feel, doesn't have that extra touch that Walter Hill can do.
Well, there wasn't anything lazy about the movie that came out the following week. It was pretty damn groundbreaking at the time, which was Robert Zemeckis' Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which this movie, I remember this movie came out with such an enormous buzz. One of those, you've never seen this before, and it's so technically advanced. And Zemeckis, he's done that a couple of times in his career. Mm-hmm. But this was also great because I remember it was such a great thing to see Bob Hoskins in a movie that was a massive success.
Yeah.
And he looked like he was having a great time with it. And then, Kathleen Turner, who ended up looking like a refrigerator, she still had that sexy voice. So.
That's man.
And Charles, was it Charles Fleischer that did the voice of Roger Rabbit, and then we saw him years later actually in the flesh doing Zodiac.
Right, being one of the Zodiac suspects. Well, and then of course you had Christopher Lloyd as the judge, Joanna Cassidy, who I was always a big fan of. I assume we all saw this in theaters.
Yeah.
No, I did not see this in theaters. I didn't.
Really?
I did not see it. I didn't. I remember I was working in my dad's office, and a woman said, "You got to go see it." And I said, I definitely want to go see it." But
yeah, and Roger Rabbit have either of you seen it in recent times? Again?
No,
but I'd like to because it's such a good movie. I just haven't.
I have. It still holds up. The animation still. I mean, because it was hand drawn, cell by cell, frame by frame. So that kind of makes it. It ensures that it's not going to look bad ever. It's just whenever they go and restore. I haven't seen the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray hasn't come out yet, right? Has not come out, the Blu-ray.
I don't know.
I'm sure it'll look fabulous. So no, it still holds up. The opening 5 minutes is still one of the funniest cartoons ever. Roger Rabbit taking care of the baby. Still, and of course the great Joel Silver cameo as the director, which apparently that was like an inside joke because I think he was forbidden from a Disney lot, and so they snuck him on to do that cameo just to annoy whoever banned him. So no, terrific, still a great movie. Still a great movie.
It is available now on Blu-ray. Came out in March, I think. And sadly, Bob Hoskins is now retired.
Yeah.
So, because of his illness, June 29th was a big comedy hit. It was Coming to America. John Landis is Coming to America with Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall.
Dude, that movie rocks. That's the last movie I really, 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 really like Eddie Murphy in.
And so this one, I guess we all, once again, did we see this in theater, guys?
No.
I know I did.
I didn't.
You didn't? Okay. Jamie?
I can't remember. I can't remember. I was just thankful that John Landis didn't kill anybody making this movie. It was good.
But yeah.
But how many times have we seen this movie, though? Let's ask that. I've lost track of how many times.
I think Coming to America is a terrific Eddie Murphy. I mean, it was that's for that 80s spat of Eddie movies, that first wave of Eddie movies, that's probably his best, most fully realized performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He really showed real promise. And
wasn't it the first time he took on multiple characters?
Yes, it was.
And they're all great. That barbershop scene is worth the price right there. I mean, that's hilarious. If
you believe Landis, that film holds the record for the shortest turnaround from going into production to editing to going into 2000 screens. Was like 3 weeks, like a 3-week post. Because apparently he was editing at night while filming. So he had to meet a date. Well,
July 4th wasn't the prime real estate then that it is now.
Oh God, no! I don't even think I've been able to sit through either one of these all the way through.
So, I mean, when we look at, it was the weekend after, July 6th, or the days after, the 4th of July weekend, we had License to Drive and Short Circuit 2, and neither one really set the world on fire. What was the song that came from License to Drive? That was Get Out of My Dreams, Get Into My Car, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Oh, that's a great song. Come on.
It's a good pop song, actually. I think the thing was they just assumed that, rightfully so, Eddie Murphy was going to own that week, so they just didn't really put anything truly substantial in its way for that week of July 4th. Because they knew Eddie Murphy was the biggest star at that time, so he kind of owned that whole week, and I think it was probably a smart move. And it is, and talk about a quick turnaround on Short Circuit 2. Remember, Short Circuit 1, obviously, came out in May of 86, and did modestly well. Wasn't a sleeper hit, but it just did modest numbers, but had an explosion on that fall and Christmas on
home video
of 86 on video and HBO. And so basically they just rushed kind of the sequel into production,
and they were under the impression that the main delight from the first movie was Fisher Stevens' character, and so they made him the central focus of the second one.
That and I think I'm sure Steve Guttenberg realized I've done too many sequels. I'm not going to do another sequel. So. Yeah, Short Circuit 2. It's a sweet little tiny sequel. It's not a bad film. It's actually a good film. It's just kind of it's a minor film, but it is good. It's not offensive. It is good though.
2 days later, another sequel did come out. No, 2 other sequels came out. Also part 2s. Arthur 2 on the Rocks. And Phantasm 2.
And these were 2 sequels that were just way too late. I think Phantasm was 9 years after the first one, and
but
Arthur was 7 years. I mean, the world had changed between summer of 81 to summer of 88. But
the second Phantasm film is so sick. I watched that on cable with my dad late at night. When we didn't get cable till I think 89 in our neck of the woods. So I was watching it. I'd come home, after freshman in college. I watched it with my dad late at night. At the time that was I thought sick. I mean, there's a lot of gross shit in that movie.
I just they're not good. I know they've made I think 2 or 3 others. They're not. I know some of the fanboys swear by the Phantasm series, swear by Dan Cascarelli, but...
Well, I do. I like John Dies at the End, and I like Bubba Hotep. I won't lie to you. I thought those were good. And I like some of these things, but I don't think I have any
He was a really nice guy.
He is a good guy, and he's very bright. I mean...
But I know someone that swears by Phantasm. They're big fans of it. I've never gone into it with him why, but so definitely, I mean, there's a big fandom around him. But in terms of Arthur 2, I still thought that there were laughs in it, even though they weren't as sharp or as plentiful as Steve Gordon did in the original movie.
Right, yeah, it's just not there. I mean,
but there's the interesting thing with Arthur 2, the period of time between the first Arthur in 81 and this one. I mean, alcoholism was front and center, and all the treatment clinics and that kind of thing. It was started to really be taken seriously as a disease, a treatable disease. So that kind of sucked a lot of the humor out of that concept in the first place. I remember when they were doing press tours for the movie, that was a constant question. Like, is it responsible to laugh at alcoholics anymore? Is it funny anymore?
Well, and that was the problem with the film. They tried to have it both ways. They tried to have Arthur be still a funny drunk, but also try to dry out. And frankly, you don't want Arthur to be sober. A sober Arthur is a boring Arthur. So if you're gonna make an Arthur 2 sequel, give us more Arthur being himself and just deal with that.
But nobody wanted Dudley Moore to do a movie sober. I mean, almost every movie he did had to have a drunk scene in it.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point. We don't want it takes. I mean, this is a problem with This is a lot of problem with reboots and remakes because they want to be politically correct or something. But a lot of these movies don't have teeth. They have nothing. There's no rough edges or anything. You're absolutely right, Aaron. We do want to see Dudley Moore drunk as Arthur. We want to see that. That's what we want to see. That's what was one of the things that made the first one so good. But you also take a look at a movie that came out, if I'm not mistaken, came out the same year, if not earlier, was Barfly about Charles Bukowski, and that's funny. To an extent, I mean, there is some humor there. I mean, but not like an Arthur kind of.
Yeah, but I mean, you see the ugliness of alcohol.
Oh, you definitely see the ugliness there.
Yeah.
But we get to one of the great about that later on this summer.
Yeah, I did see this movie the next week because my family used to vacation at the beach every year, and that would be the one time during the year that my father would go see a movie. So the movie that we saw that summer together, opening weekend, was The Deadpool. That came out the following week, July 13th. The last Dirty Harry movie. Was it a worthy entry?
It's more worthy who's in it, actually, than,
I actually think it is it's a good final film, and in a summer of sequels, this is actually probably the best of the sequels from that summer.
I saw it twice in the theater.
It's a lot of fun. It's both, it delivers what a Dirty Harry movie should deliver, but it also kind of kids the whole Dirty Harry mythos at the same time.
Yes, it does.
It's a tightly structured, wound piece of filmmaking, and it's just a fun entry into Dirty Harry movies. The last one, Sudden Impact, is so kind of
ugly.
It's also
it is
kind of
ugly. It is. I was going to say that it is. There is something really. Sudden Impact maybe is my least favorite. I mean, Magnum Force is obviously my favorite, but the Deadpool has so much fun. He is winking a lot at the camera.
I just always like the idea of that character, Dirty Harry, being romantic. Like, they try to throw in a romantic subplot in Dirty Harry.
Yeah.
And poor Patricia Clarkson. I mean, it's like trying to make a piece of furniture animated when you're playing a love scene with Clint Eastwood as Dirty Harry.
I love the fact that, because obviously Clint Eastwood, controlled it even though he wasn't directing, but, like, she has, like, the tightest blouses and, like, the shortest skirts that an anchor woman's ever had.
Yeah.
I guess
also,
that was awesome.
This is a big deal. Besides Jim Carrey and Liam Neeson, you also have Guns N' Roses are in the movie.
Oh,
and
yes.
This is a big deal at the time.
That was a selling point. They think they make a cameo at the funeral. Which I always find that funny. I don't know. I hope there was a moment where they said, Clint, here, these are Guns N' Roses, you should meet them. And, Clint Eastwood hasn't listened to anything after 1957 jazz records, so I kind of like, if there's a photo op somewhere of Clint Eastwood shaking Axl Rose's hand, that's a great photo.
2 days later, July 15th, was an action movie that changed a lot, which was Die Hard, and it certainly changed Bruce Willis's career. I mean, they wanted Al Pacino to star in Die Hard, and he turned it down. And I think the process for I don't know what number Bruce Willis was on the list of actors to go to, but it had to be pretty far down because he was a TV actor.
And more comedic than anything else. I saw the ad for that and I didn't know what to think. The Bruce Willis in an action movie?
Wasn't Moonlighting still going on at this time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Moonlighting was still going on. He had done Blind Date, and when was Sunset? Was Sunset the following year?
I think that's a good question.
Sunset was that year. Sunset, right. I think, came out in April.
Okay, so there you go. Yeah, so I mean, he had that, which I actually liked Sunset, but it didn't fare very well.
That's Blake Edwards, isn't it?
Blake Edwards, yeah. Bruce Willis. I mean, and that's the thing. Bruce Willis he's really good at comedy, and so yeah, Die Hard changed everything. And as you can tell, as we were talking about, Schwarzenegger and Stallone had these kind of their standard issue summer steroid action movies, and they just seem kind of bloated and tired. And then you get something very lean and claustrophobic like Die Hard, and it just kind of blew everything out of the water action wise.
And it was so good. It was just good.
I think that the thing that it changed about action movies was the action hero became an everyman. I mean, it became somebody that was vulnerable, and someone that you could relate to in a way that you could never do with a Schwarzenegger or
Stallone, or even a James Bond. Remember, David Anson, I think, was the one who said he was a blue-collar James Bond. But when the second one came out, so yeah, I mean,
free John McTiernan. That's all I gotta say. Free John.
Yeah, and the other thing, McTiernan was coming off of Predator, which was also a lean piece of action from the previous
Predator and
one.
then Nomads. Was it Nomads his first film?
That was 86. So he really knew how to do the lean action films, and of course, Schwarzenegger got wind of it, so he tapped him for Last Action Hero, and you know how that turned out. But yeah, in Die Hard, one of those films, it also hung around. I think it finally went to number one late in the summer, but it was one of those that it was constantly going. Like I remember it would yo-yo from 2 to 4 to 3 to back to 4 and then back to 2, and then finally one week it went to number one. Just one of those films that just kept staying in the top 5 for I think about 2-3 months. It stayed there, and then and of course I remember I don't remember the trailer, but I do remember all the TV spots. They always show the shot of him jumping off the building. That was always and
I remember the newspaper ads, and they came with some tagline that says "Prepare to get blown in the back of the." Well, that sounds sexual, but prepare to get blown back in the theater
blown
or something
to the back
like
of the theater.
Yeah, something like that, which could have been like a very sexual tagline.
Right.
But because I've been blown before in a theater, but it wasn't during Die Hard. But that movie was really amazing. I remember seeing that on opening weekend, and it majorly changed things. And all of a sudden, we saw Bruce Willis in a much different light.
Yeah.
That same day, A Fish Called Wanda opened. Massive comedy hit, and won Kevin Kline the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. For a comedy. And Kevin,
that's
totally
a great film. That's such a funny movie.
Yeah,
a hysterical movie, and plus, it also did wonders for Jamie Lee Curtis, but Kevin Kline's character just completely popped. I mean, that was an extremely funny creation.
I think that was the film. That and Die Hard were the ones that were constantly in the top 5. They were constantly switching places. One was 2, one was 3, then one was 3, one was 2, and they were constantly...
No, Trading Places was Jamie Lee Curtis's movie a few years earlier. But another thing about Die Hard, opened on July 15th. But now it is, for a lot of people, it's their favorite Christmas movie.
That's true.
It airs every Christmas. I watch it every Christmas.
No, it's a great.
It takes over Lethal Weapon and To Live and Die in L.A. That's the